Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take complex research, dense sources, and professional notes and give you the absolute need-to-know, zero-slough core insights.
Today, we're looking at something fascinating.
We're focusing on one of the most demanding but maybe least understood professions out there, leadership in higher education. The people actually running our universities and colleges.
That's absolutely right. And when most of us think about university administration, our minds go to the big, visible challenges, enrollment numbers, financial problems, big strategic plans.
Right, this stuff you see in the headlines.
Exactly. But the sources you've shared with me reveal that underneath all of that, leaders are dealing with this massive, invisible operational cost. It's the psychological effort, the sheer work required just to show up and maintain composure.
And that's our mission today. We want to extract those hidden costs, the toll this work really takes, and then look at the evidence-based support mechanisms that these institutions have to adopt if they want to stop burning out their most critical people. So, okay, let's unpack this. There's this specific, often unspoken emotional dimension to the work that it's just never on the organizational chart. What exactly are we talking about here?
Well, we're diving into a concept called emotional labor. And this is a term that originally comes from sociology. It was first applied decades ago to service workers.
Oh, like flight attendants, people in customer service?
Precisely. People who have to manage their own feelings to display a specific required emotion as part of their job. For academic leaders, it's the constant work of managing, regulating, and often suppressing what they authentically feel to meet professional expectations. It's deep psychological work.
So it's not just feeling the stress, it's the extra job of managing how you appear to feel. And your source material breaks this down into three really distinct layers.
Yes, and these details are crucial. The first layer is probably the most recognizable. It's called surface acting.
Surface acting, okay.
This is basically managing your outward expression when your inner feelings are, completely different.
Can you give us a concrete example of that on a campus?
Sure. Think of a department chair. Internally, they are just full of frustration. Maybe their budget just got cut again.
For the fifth year in a row.
Exactly. But they have to sit in a really tense faculty meeting and smile, project calm, and kind of keep up an optimistic front for morale. It's putting on the mask.
It's that show must go on thing. But that takes energy. So if surface acting is the mask, what happens when you have to convince yourself? That seems like a much deeper commitment.
Well, that brings us to the second and much more intensive level, deep acting.
Okay.
Here, the leader isn't just faking it. They're actively working to modify their actual internal feelings to align them with what the role demands. They're trying to reshape their own experience.
So a provost isn't just pretending to be excited about some tedious 18-month strategic plan. They're consciously trying to generate genuine excitement in themselves to get everyone else on board.
You've got it.
But wait, why is that labor? Isn't that just, good leadership?
That's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of it. The distinction is the effort it takes to generate an emotion that doesn't come naturally, and the sheer constancy of that effort. Deep acting requires sustained cognitive work to reframe things, to manage your own anxieties. It's a much heavier lift.
And the third type is the one that really drains the battery. This is the one that leads straight to burnout, emotional dissonance.
That's the core psychological tension we see in the sources. Dissonance is that huge internal gap between what you genuinely feel and what you absolutely must express.
So like a VP for student affairs managing a major campus crisis.
Yes, exactly. A serious safety threat. They have to project calm, authority, and certainty, but inside they might be feeling total fear and panic, that conflict, that's dissonance.
So the effort of pretending to be calm or forcing yourself to be excited isn't just tiring. You're saying the conflict itself actually depletes the resources you need to govern well.
Absolutely. Sustained dissonance. The research is clear. It burns through your cognitive and emotional reserves. You're using up the mental energy you need for complex problem solving just by fighting your own internal reality.
And the academic context is unique here because the expectations themselves are so contradictory. You have to be an authority figure and a colleague, decisive and consultative.
Exactly. It's all built on shared governance, which means authority is ambiguous. You have to lead through persuasion and influence, which is so much more emotionally draining than just giving a directive.
That sets us up perfectly for the next part. Because here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just a personal problem for the leader. The failure to acknowledge this has massive, measurable costs for the whole institution.
The pressures are accelerating. First, you have these enormous transformation pressures. Leaders are navigating huge shifts in enrollment, teaching, funding.
And managing everyone's anxiety about it.
All of it. And then, of course, you have resource constraints. You're making incredibly tough decisions, cutting budgets, and you're still somehow expected to keep morale high. It's an impossible emotional tightrope.
And that's before you even get to the polarization. All the societal conflicts over free speech, diversity, that all lands on the university president's desk.
It does. And they're expected to absorb all that intense emotion, the anger, the fear, and just process it impartially without showing any strain themselves.
And you mentioned that this burden, this invisible work, isn't spread out evenly, is it?
Not at all. And this is a critical point. The data shows that mid-level administrators, department chairs, associate deans, they report especially high demands. They're sort of stuck in the middle.
The sandwich position, yeah.
But crucially, we have to talk about the additional burden on women and administrators from underrepresented backgrounds.
Tell us more about that. What does that look like?
Well, they often face this extra layer of emotional labor. They're managing other people's discomfort. They're constantly educating colleagues. They're navigating stereotypes. So they're not just managing the institution's business, but also the emotional climate around them in a way their majority group colleagues just don't have to.
Wow, so you're basically paying an unfair emotional tax just to do your job. So when institutions ignore this, what happens? What are the real organizational consequences?
The costs are huge. First, you see leadership turnover and instability. And I mean, these are expensive transitions. A presidential search can cost an institution, what, $100,000, $300,000 or more.
And that's just the direct cost. The instability itself has a price.
A huge one. But the deeper cost is probably degraded decision quality. When leaders are emotionally depleted, they just don't have the mental bandwidth for creative problem solving. They default to easier, simpler answers.
And I'd imagine that if you're constantly performing, putting on that mask, people eventually stop trusting you.
You're right. We see relationship deterioration. That sustained performance starts to feel inauthentic, maybe even manipulative, and it just erodes the trust you need for shared governance to even work.
And for the individual, it's burnout, cynicism, even physical health problems. It sounds like this isn't a luxury item. Supporting leaders is an operational requirement.
The sources are crystal clear on this. It is an institutional imperative. The institution has a vested interest in the wholeness of its leaders.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem. This constant, invisible emotional labor is just not sustainable. Let's shift to the solutions. What can universities actually do right now?
It starts by just normalizing the conversation. The first domain of strategy is simply transparent communication.
Meaning you have to name it, you have to call it what it is. Legitimate work. How do you do that?
Well, you can start by explicitly including emotional competencies in leadership evaluations, things like conflict mediation. That signals that this is valued.
Right.
We also see examples like at the University of Michigan and Vanderbilt where they have these structured peer groups for administrators.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they're often facilitated by organizational psychologists, and they give leaders a safe space to just talk about these challenges. It normalizes it.
Okay, so naming it is step one.
Yeah.
But ambiguity is a big part of the problem. So the next step must be about clarity.
Precisely. The second strategy is procedural justice and role clarity. You have to reduce the ambiguity. There's a fascinating review at Ohio State University.
Oh, what did they find?
They found their department chairs were spending 15 to 20 hours a week on what they called emotional and relational work.
15 to 20 hours, that's half a work week.
It's massive, and it was totally invisible in their workload models.
Yeah.
So based on that data, they actually made structural changes. They adjusted teaching loads, they added administrative support, they acknowledged the real demand.
So once you define the work, you have to train people for it. That must be next.
Yes. The third strategy is leadership capability building, focused on emotional intelligence. You treat it like a trainable skill. Cornell, for example, has a module for associate deans on leading through relationships.
And they actually practice these skills.
They do. And the University of California system provides executive coaching, but, and this is key, they frame it as professional development, not remediation. That reduces the stigma so leaders actually use it.
That reframing is so important. Okay, so if the burden is too high for one person, the next solution seems obvious. Don't have just one person.
Exactly. Strategy 4 is structural role design and distributed leadership. You design roles to share the load. Oberlin College created senior associate dean positions focused specifically on faculty well-being and conflict mediation.
So they created a buffer.
A human buffer, yes. They absorb that reactive emotional work so the chairs can focus on the academic mission. Georgetown has also used co-chair models, letting one person focus on external relations and the other on internal climate.
And finally, you have to back it all up with actual resources.
Yes. The fifth strategy is financial and well-being support structures. Arizona State has an administrative renewal fellowship, which is basically a semester-long sabbatical for administrators just for recovery and renewal.
Not for research, just for recovery.
Just for recovery. It acknowledges that emotional capital runs out and has to be replenished. Stanford did something similar by rebranding its support center to reduce stigma and get more leaders to actually use the services.
These are all powerful, but the sources you shared suggest that if they're just one-off fixes, they won't stick. Sustainability requires something deeper.
It does. There are three final pillars for long-term change. The first is fundamental. You have to recalibrate the psychological contract.
The unwritten agreement between the leader and the institution.
Exactly. We have to move from treating this emotional work as an uncompensated duty to seeing it as specialized labor that requires support and recovery time, and that includes addressing the extra load on women and underrepresented leaders.
The second pillar is about culture. Building a distributed leadership structure and culture.
Right. It's not just sharing tasks, it's sharing the emotional burden. And it means senior leaders have to model setting boundaries. When the president says, I am taking a week off and unplugging, that gives everyone else permission to do the same.
And the final piece is making sure it lasts.
Creating continuous learning systems. So, not just one-off trainings. You need regular feedback loops, collective sense-making after a crisis, and mentoring programs that pass on the wisdom of sustainable leadership.
This deep dive has really shown that emotional labor isn't a soft skill or a personal problem. It's a fundamental part of the work that holds these institutions together. The goal isn't to get rid of emotion. The goal is to create conditions where people can be sustainable and authentic in their work.
And that's the institutional challenge. Organizations have to move from expecting individuals to just cope in secret to providing collective, visible support. I mean, the future of higher education really depends on protecting the wholeness of its leaders, not just their productivity.
We've explored how crucial it is for institutions to value their leaders' wholeness. And that means valuing all this emotional work. So as you reflect on this, think about your own work environment. What boundaries could you define or advocate for that would shift the contract away from self-sacrifice and toward sustainable contribution? We hope you use this knowledge to drive that change.